They say a crown is for a king, but apparently it's for a knight too.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. It's Monday, and joining me is my good friend, Andrew Gluco from the Last Word on Sports. First word on this topic, Andrew. Today we're talking about the UCF Knights getting the invite to the Crown Tournament, the inaugural Crown Tournament. We're going to analyze the field, and we're going to talk about what UCF has to prove all on today's show. Starting with the invite, look, you said that this was a likely scenario that UCF would get this invite. I think beating Utah in the first round of the Big 12 tournament and then a fantastic showing in the second round versus Kansas. I picked the Knights to win it. They came up just short. Oh, just so short again versus the Kansas Jayhawks. But ultimately, they're still playing basketball, and I think that's a good thing for Johnny Dawkins' squad.
Yeah, when it came to that Kansas game, I hate being right. I didn't want to be right, but c'est la vie. Here's truth. You know, UCF defeating Utah and the way the rest of the tournament broke down, UCF had had a higher net rating, which is what mattered in this, in this venue, over Utah, over Kansas State, less than Cincinnati and West Virginia. West Virginia being snubbed for the NCAA tournament, which was a crime, an absolute crime. They opted not to go to any tournament. They would have gotten an auto bid to this one, the college basketball crown. And as we learned over time, because they had to finally clarify it, we thought it was compulsory that if you're an auto team, you go. You can say no, as it turns out, but you can't go anywhere else. So Ohio State said no, Indiana said no, West Virginia said no. So all of them couldn't, accept a bid to like the NIT. But UCF and four other Big 12 schools: Colorado, Arizona State, Cincinnati, and I'm drawing a blank on the last one. I'll remember it in just a second when I finally don't need it.
We'll talk about it in the next segment. We got the bracket.
Because Murphy's Law, they're all going to be there. UCF, actually has the second highest net of all the Big 12 teams in the tournament. It's 16 teams. It runs for a week from Monday, March 31st through Sunday, April 6th. So it finishes up right before, the end of the, NCAA tournament. It's going to be on Fox properties, Fox and FS1. So if you got, cable, you can watch all the games. Fox is an owner of this tournament, which is why the Big East, Big 10, and Big 12 are so prominent in this tournament, is because they're conferences that have it. And so UCF felt that this was a better opportunity for them. When you look at the teams in the tournament, it really is a better opportunity. The NIT only has 4 power conference teams. If you look at the Power 4 plus the Big East out of 32, whereas, you've got more than double that out of 16 teams in the college basketball crowd. So UCF, we knew they were going to play somewhere. The question was where, but now it's set. They're in the college basketball crowd. They're going to Vegas.
They are going to Vegas again. Look, we knew it was a long shot for them to go very far into the Big 12 tournament. And the goal was find a way to play more basketball. Certainly, they accomplished that. You and I did not get a chance to recap the Kansas game, but it was more of the same. It was an excellent performance. I thought I had bad feelings when Darius Johnson fouled out. Now, Kansas's point guard ended up fouling out of the game in overtime as well. But certainly the loss of Darius Johnson hurt UCF more than the loss of Kansas's point guard hurt them, I thought, especially in the extra period. But that's been the story for UCF. It's been, once you get past the starters, there's not a ton there. Now, I don't think we saw Mikey Williams in the game versus Kansas, did we?
No, he's been banged up. He didn't make the trip at all for the conference tournament. So the question is, will he be available? They've got a couple weeks to heal up, from this point. So there's time, but whether he plays or not, still up in the air.
Yeah, right. The conference starts on March 31st. So there'll be a day, the first 2 days. It's a Monday, Tuesday start to the tournament. So you're right. A couple weeks to heal up before they get into this one. But certainly, I think this is a great thing that they've started here with the college basketball crown tournament. They have an official Twitter, Andrew. You can follow them at Twitter at CBB Crown. If you want to follow any news coming out of that tournament there, the official bracket is posted. They've got merch, and it's not a bad thing that it's in Vegas. I think Vegas is always a cool place to go for a basketball tournament.
Oh, well, not only that, but the West Coast Conference had their tournament in Vegas. Granted, this is going to be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. For the first 2 rounds, and then at the T-Mobile Arena for the semifinals and finals. So, obviously, you work in a smaller venue, you're on FS1 those first 2 rounds, but then you work your way up, you get to onto Fox, those final rounds in the championship game on Sunday. Sunday afternoon, 2:30 Pacific time, so 5:30 Eastern for us Eastern folk. It's gonna come quick. Outside of Friday, there's at least a game every day. So it's gonna be a very intense week. Much like conference tournaments, all these teams are gonna have 2 weeks to heal up. The first set of games, as you said, are on the 31st or 2 weeks from now. So you get a little bit of rest time and then dive in. This tournament is designed to go up against the NIT. And the way they designed it is they definitely got the better teams, the better matchups. I think it's going to be a little bit of a boon for Fox. Fox has always struggled behind ESPN when it comes to television ratings, but all these games are on TV. The Fox games are accessible. The only thing I wonder is how accessible these FS1 games are going to be for people who have cut the cord. Fox is not as accessible as say ESPN Plus or something to that effect. So accessibility is my biggest question as far as being able to watch UCF in this tournament or any of the other games if they interest you. But I think this is a really interesting tournament. The whole premise of it, the prize is NIL dollars. If I'm correct, it's a $2 million NIL prize, which UCF certainly can use. That would be huge. So there's definitely a carrot at the end of the stick for these schools to compete for. And I understand why the Ohio States and the West Virginias decide not to. But UCF certainly could use, the exposure, and the money's nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, NIL dollars are never a bad thing in today's college sports climate. So certainly, I think that's a great prize here for Johnny Dawkins. We talked about the money that they're probably going to need to spend to compete next year. But certainly, if Johnny Dawkins is your coach, I think you got to get behind him. And it might be a blessing in disguise getting into this tournament, I think, for UCF, so that they can continue to build for the future. But hey, what does the bracket look like? We're going to talk about everybody who made the inaugural college basketball crown tournament after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Factor. Let me start that over. Yeah. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Factor. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated, guys. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat up in just 2 minutes so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences. Each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. They're convenient. They've got a variety of meals and tastes. And the beyond just meals are also great. So Factor also offers smoothies, breakfasts, and snacks. So you always have something nutritious ready to go. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Supply House. Look, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades at Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Let's take a look at the bracket, Andrew. Again, as we mentioned, UCF has made it. They've done it. They're playing postseason basketball. The Crown Tournament released a bracket for us to look at. We're going to put that on the screen here for our listeners. I'm going to read it out loud for our friends on pod. Again, the tournament starts on Monday, March 31st. That first matchup of the day at noon is Utah versus Butler. So Utah versus Butler there. And it looks like we get, is that George Washington versus Boise State there in the second matchup?
That is correct.
Yep. Again, in the 2:30 Pacific time slot, we get George Washington versus Boise State. Monday, March the 31st at 5:30 Pacific, we get Nebraska versus Arizona State. So another Big 12 team and Arizona State in there. And then the last matchup of the day at 8 p.m. Pacific, we get Georgetown versus Washington State. Then on Tuesday, April 1st, we get Cincinnati versus, who is that there? I'm sorry.
That's Nepal.
Right. Sorry about that. The symbol was a little small there. And then the matchup everybody's waiting for, Tuesday, April the 1st at 2:30 p.m. Pacific, UCF versus Oregon State. So the Beavers will take on the Knights there in the second matchup of the second day. Colorado versus Villanova in that third spot at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And then last but certainly not least, Tulane versus University of Southern California at 8 p.m. Pacific there. That's the matchup of the first Crown tournament put on by Fox. Look, UCF plays on day 2 in the second time slot, and they get Oregon State. How do we feel about this field, first and foremost? We got a few Big 12 schools in this thing, man. It's actually a remarkable amount of Big 12 schools in this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You start off with, the teams on the left side of the bracket, Utah and Arizona State. Arizona State was rumored pretty early that they were going to go to the Crown. I guess that was something that was pretty much settled, that they were going to accept an at-large. They were not one of the top 2 net teams, but they were still very interested. And then on the other side of the bracket, you have UCF's, which is UCF and Cincinnati. So that quadrant of the bracket has Big 12 in each of the first round matchups. And then you have Colorado in the third matchup against Villanova. So you got a very spread out group. Oklahoma State ended up in the NIT. Kansas State and West Virginia opted not to play postseason basketball. Certainly their prerogative. Kansas State kind of had a rough year. West Virginia, I can tell this the level of letdown that they must be feeling for the crime against humanity.
There's one every year. There's one every year.
Man. And they just keep finding ways to make it worse. I mean, this one was just so egregiously bad. The snub of putting North Carolina in and West Virginia out. They're going to be talking about that one for a while. But we're going to talk about this one in the fact that UCF is going to play Oregon State out of the West Coast Conference, not the Pac-12 technically. And it's going to be at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. That's 5:30 Eastern. That'll be on Fox Sports 1. So as we get closer, this will be April 1st. We'll keep you apprised on what's going on and when. Now, this is an interesting matchup. You look at the two teams. Oregon State was a very you thought UCF yo-yoed as far as wins and losses. Oregon State had some, like, they defeated Gonzaga at home, and Gonzaga is top 10 in the net. But then they lost to they lost to Pepperdine in the West Coast Conference tournament. Pepperdine at the time was their record is 12-22, and they have a net of 227. They also lost to Portland, who's 10-20 with a net of 288. So they have some bad losses. You look at the net. UCF, obviously, we know, has the 3 net wins. They're 3-11 in quad 1 games. However, Oregon State 1-7. Here's the thing. If you look at quad 3 and 4 for Oregon State, they're 16-3, UCF 11-0. UCF's played tougher teams, but they haven't lost against the really bad ones. Oregon State 85 in the net, UCF 71. On paper, UCF should be the better team, but as we know, never count out UCF-UCF-ing a game. And that's a term that I finally remember back in my days as a student for UCF football games, where they would find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. This team has proven to be wildly inconsistent, the Knights, and as long as their guys get going, they can play with anyone. Look what they did with Kansas, Houston, and beating Texas Tech. However, they do have some times where they just can't buy a bucket and just fall apart. This is a very beatable Oregon State squad. It really is. They are not a heavy scoring team. They average 76 points a game. They're 109. Their strength is in their defense. They only give up less than 69 points a game. And we all know about UCF's porous defense. So the real question is, can UCF's defense turn it up a notch, take advantage of this 2 weeks off to get rested and scout properly and just get mentally prepared for the rigors of having to play, multiple games over multiple days. Again, they did well in the Big 12 tournament. They kind of shot themselves in the foot against Kansas. Every time they got tied or within one, they had a chance to take the lead. They somehow did something dumb. A bad pass, dribble off the foot, a little bit of hero ball. It wasn't until one part of the game in the second half where they started to score and was able to get a lead. But they kept allowing Kansas to hang around. They couldn't put the foot on the throat and finish the job. This is an opportunity where UCF is going to have to gain that killer instinct. You need it. UCF likely would play Cincinnati in the second round, and UCF did not beat Cincinnati the last time they played. It was a 10-point game. It was in Orlando, 93-83. Obviously, UCF gave up a lot of points during that big losing streak during the middle of the year. They've kind of started to right the ship a little bit, winning some good games against Kansas State, 2 against Utah. I think UCF, if they can get the right mindset, get a little bit of luck, I mean, they could make a run in this tournament. It's not like, the Big 12 tournament where you had to go against Kansas and then in Arizona and then in Houston. There's nobody like that in the crowd. Yeah. They're all second tier and down teams. So UCF is in a lot better and matchup wise with a lot of these teams.
Yeah, if you're UCF, your challenge is not playing down to the competition, right? We know what this team can do when they get going, Andrew. Again, we've seen it close but no cigar versus so many good teams in the Big 12 this year, just unable to get it done down the stretch. What I saw versus Kansas was I saw a team that ran out of gas. They were tired. Man, look, Keyshawn Hall looked like he had have you ever seen that episode of Dragon Ball Z where King Kai puts like the weights on Goku's like arms and then he's like,
is it bad? I know what you're talking about.
That's what they look like down the stretch there, man. They look like they were working out with magical weights on. They were just tired, and so yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure that any of the teams in this tournament have the ability to run UCF the way Kansas did and run them out of gas. But certainly, I think it's going to be fun to watch, and I'm glad that we get to see more UCF basketball because at the end of the day, this is a talented team at the one deep. One more chance to kind of show off what you have. I think for anybody who's not coming back for the scouts, and really just go out and give UCF fans one more show before the end of the season. If you're Johnny Dawkins, I think it's an opportunity to show that you can get your team over the hump, right, and win a close game and instill some hope for the future, which is really what postseason basketball is about. If you're not in that NCAA tournament, what can you do to use to build on? So it will be interesting, I think, to watch and see what they do there. Because look, if you're UCF, you knew this was the likely outcome. Again, you weren't surprised by this. As a matter of fact, weeks out, you started saying that this was a likely outcome. Certainly, I think UCF should take it. There's something to take advantage of here. And then we're talking about the potential prize in the NIL dollars. Before we move on, let's take a look at this bracket again. Again, for our listeners, again, DePaul and Cincinnati there on UCF's day as the first game. UCF, Oregon State, game 2. Villanova, Colorado, game 3. Tulane and USC, game 4 there on April the 3rd. So they've got some time to rest up. If UCF wins, they'll be playing either DePaul or Cincinnati. On their side of the bracket, if they continue to advance, they will run into some combination of Colorado, Villanova, Tulane, or USC, and then meet in that championship game from those teams on that left side of the bracket that play on Monday. So we'll see where they land up, Andrew. But look, what does UCF have to prove in this one? We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. Look, you can pick your favorite team, stay in the action. It's fast, it's easy, it's fun. It's FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long with our friends at FanDuel.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
What does UCF have to prove in this one? Can they win it all? Which I think is a better question. We dealt with it in the last segment. You feel like they've got a good shot. No juggernauts in this tournament, except for maybe the UCF Knights. Are they the juggernaut of this tournament right now? Offensively, I feel like they might be. I think that they have a chance to really do some damage to some teams. And quite honestly, and looking at this bracket, I think UCF is the team that nobody wants to play in this tournament. I think they're the team that's the most dangerous.
There's certainly a danger aspect, but they also know about the defense that UCF has or doesn't have. The team everyone should be watching out for is Cincinnati, and UCF could potentially face them in the second round. When UCF played them in the regular season, as we talked about before, UCF lost, but that was also in the midst of a bad losing streak. So who knows what exactly UCF's defense is going to bring this time around. They were a little better against Kansas. That game went to overtime, remember? So you had extra basketball time, and by then everyone's just huffing and puffing. And so the defense just starts to fall apart. But if they can keep things going, if players like Tyler Hendricks can come off the bench and give you some meaningful minutes, maybe he's the guy who draws commits the fouls instead of Mustafa Cham, and so you don't have to worry about your starters going to the bench in foul trouble. That goes a long way too. I think It's very important for UCF to maintain that mental aptitude, not commit fouls and get into trouble, and be able to rely on that starting unit, because that's where the offensive power is. There is just not a whole lot available off the bench. You may get a little bit here and there, but nothing really to write home about. So this is a team a little bit in flux as far as their starting lineup goes. They during the Kansas game, they inserted Jordan Ivory Curry back into the starting lineup after his time away from being hurt. He was off the bench in the first round against Utah. So the expectation is he would start again, in this one against Oregon State. But once you get past Cincinnati, you look at the rest of the field. Colorado has given UCF fits. They split the series between the two. It was always an offensive fest. But when you look at the grand scheme, Colorado is not a great team. They just exploited UCF's bad defense.
Right.
So, it's very beatable. Again, we talked about this. These are all tier 2 and 3 teams. UCF matches up pretty well against all of them outside maybe 1 or 2. And, they certainly can make some noise. Now, if they win game 1 against Oregon State, they guarantee themselves a winning record for the year. They're currently 17-16. They can finish no worse than 17-17, but a win will secure Johnny Dawkins winning a winning season. And I think a win should also lock him in for next season as coach of UCF.
Yeah. I think a win should lock him in, definitely. And, at the end of the day, if you're Johnny Dawkins, look, this season wasn't what you wanted it to be, right? Again, you wanted to take more steps. There were some really good quad 1 opportunities on this schedule, Andrew, that UCF missed out on, quite frankly. But I think there was enough there to say, hey, this thing can be something great. We just have to put a little bit of support behind it. College basketball has changed since Johnny Dawkins got hired as coach at UCF. College sports has changed significantly. And I'm not sure that UCF has caught up to that change. And so you own some culpability in where your programs are at right now if you're Terry Mohajir in my book. I think you look at all the coaches that you've hired. Obviously, they made a change on the football side, but now that Scott Frost is in there, you're looking at the coaches that you have, and you're saying, all right, have we supported these guys the way they need to be supported to win in today's college sports environment? I'm not sure that the answer to that question is yes, but if you're Johnny Dawkins, your job is to make sure that you give your AD enough ammo to go back and say, this is my guy. Let's just put a little bit more resources behind him, and he'll be able to go out and do the job. So this Crown tournament is one more opportunity for him to do that, I guess is my point. And hopefully we'll see what they can do here. But look, great conversation. I'm looking forward to watching UCF basketball in a couple of weeks. I feel 2 weeks is a long time. It's a long time to wait for this.
A lot of basketball going on, so you won't be bored.
Yeah, that's for sure. I definitely will be covering the NCAA tournament live from Lexington this week. But certainly we'll be following UCF basketball as well. Andrew Gluco from The Last Word on Sports, man. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at StatBoyDrew, and catch my writing on The Last Word of College Football, a part of The Last Word on Sports family.
That's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF with my guy, Andrew Gluco from The Last Word on Sports. Guys, for your second listen, head on over to Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.